My son preferred his wife's birthday party to his mother's funeral. The dirt was still fresh on my wife's grave when he walked into my house the next morning, smelling of stale champagne and audacity. He did not come to apologize. He did not come to mourn. He came with a demand. He wanted the deed to the house my wife and I built with 40 years of sweat and sacrifice. He told me I was too old for this place. He told me the basement would be a perfect fit for my final years. I looked at him, this stranger wearing my son's face, and I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. He wanted a signature, so I gave him one. But it wasn't on the deed to the house. It was on an eviction notice. Before I tell you how I legally destroyed my own son to teach him a lesson he would never forget, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that respect is earned, not inherited. The rain at the cemetery was not the romantic kind you see in movies. It was cold, relentless, and soaked through my black wool coat, chilling me to the bone. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the freezing void beside me. There were 3 chairs set up in the front row under the canopy. One for me, one for my wife's sister, and one for my only son, Bradley. That 3rd chair remained empty. It stared at me like a missing tooth, a gaping hole in the universe that screamed of betrayal. The pastor was saying words about Martha's kindness, her grace, her ability to forgive. I barely heard him. My eyes were fixed on that empty folding chair. Raindrops collected on its plastic seat, pooling like the tears I refused to shed. I do not cry. Tears are for men who have hope, and I had left mine back at the hospital when the monitor flatlined. Then, a sound cut through the solemn drone of the pastor's voice, a vibration against my chest. My phone. I should have turned it off. But Martha, in her final months, had set up alerts on my phone because she wanted to see every update Bradley posted. She lived for his digital scraps. I pulled the phone from my pocket, intending to silence it. The screen lit up. It was not a message of condolence. It was an Instagram notification. Bradley Reed just posted a photo. My thumb hovered over the screen. I should have put it away, but I unlocked it. The image that loaded was so bright it almost hurt my eyes in the gloom of the graveyard. It was a selfie. Bradley was shirtless, wearing sunglasses, holding a bottle of Dom Perignon. Next to him was Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, wearing a bikini that cost more than my first car. They were on a yacht. The ocean behind them was a brilliant, mocking turquoise. They were laughing, mouths open, teeth white, heads thrown back in ecstatic joy. I read the caption. "Living our best lives. Happy 28th birthday to my queen Vanessa. No regrets. #blessed." I looked at the timestamp. 2 minutes ago. While his mother was being lowered 6 feet into the wet Florida earth, Bradley was popping corks 300 miles away in Miami. He wasn't stuck in traffic. He wasn't held up by an emergency. He was partying. I did not shake. I did not scream. I felt a cold, metallic calm settle over me. I took a screenshot of the post. The sound of the digital shutter was loud in the silence of the funeral. The pastor stopped and looked at me. My sister-in-law looked at me, her eyes red and puffy. I didn't apologize. I put the phone back in my pocket, right next to my heart. "Finish it," I told the pastor. He looked confused. "The service," I said, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "Wrap it up. Put her in the ground. She doesn't need to wait for anyone anymore." I stood there until the last shovel of dirt was thrown. I didn't say goodbye to Martha. I told her, I will handle this. It was a promise. The ride home was silent. The house was silent. The oak floors echoed with the absence of her footsteps. I sat in my leather armchair in the living room, the one Martha used to scold me for sleeping in, and I waited. I didn't turn on the lights. I watched the shadows lengthen across the room, nursing a cup of black coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The next morning brought sunlight, but no warmth. I was still in the armchair. I hadn't slept. At 8 in the morning, the silence was shattered. Not by a knock, but by the roar of an engine. I knew that sound. It was a Porsche 911. Leased, of course. Bradley never bought anything he couldn't flaunt. I heard the car doors slam. Then the front door opened without a knock. They still had a key. Bradley and Vanessa walked in. They brought the smell of the outside world with them, expensive perfume, stale alcohol, and the salty tang of the ocean. They were not wearing black. Bradley wore a linen suit that was wrinkled, his eyes hidden behind aviator sunglasses. Vanessa was wearing a bright yellow sundress, as if she were walking into a brunch, not the home of a grieving widower. She looked around the living room, wrinkling her nose. God, it smells like old people and incense in here, she said. Her voice was high, grating, like a drill. We need to gut this place, babe. Open floor plan. Get rid of all this dark wood. Bradley nudged her, a weak attempt at decorum. Hi, Dad, Bradley said. He didn't take off his sunglasses. He didn't come to hug me. He stayed near the door, hovering like a salesman who knows he's selling a lemon. I took a slow sip of my cold coffee. You missed the funeral, I said. It wasn't a question. Bradley shifted his weight. Yeah, about that. The traffic coming back from the coast was a nightmare. And honestly, Dad, Vanessa was really distraught. She loved Mom. She just couldn't handle the negative energy of a funeral on her birthday weekend. You know how spiritual she is. I looked at Vanessa. She was checking her reflection in the hallway mirror, picking at a loose strand of hair. She didn't look distraught. She looked bored. Right, I said. Negative energy. Look, Dad. Bradley stepped forward, clapping his hands together as if to change the subject to something more pleasant. We didn't just come to check on you. We have a proposition. A solution, really, for everyone. I set the coffee cup down. A solution. Vanessa walked over and stood next to him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that looked possessive rather than supportive. She was the one steering this ship. Bradley was just the figurehead. This house, Vanessa began, sweeping her hand around the room. It's too much for you, Doug. 4 bedrooms, a half-acre garden, the pool. You're 70. You can barely walk up the stairs without wheezing. It's dangerous. I don't wheeze, I said calmly. And I cleaned the gutters yesterday. Bradley cut in, his voice taking on a condescending, soothing tone. Dad, listen. We're worried about you. Mom is gone. You're all alone here. It's depressing. Vanessa and we've been talking. We think it's time for a transition. We want to move in here. I stared at him. You want to move in? Vanessa nodded enthusiastically. We can take the master suite upstairs. We'll renovate the kitchen, make it modern, increase the property value. And you can have the garden apartment. The garden apartment. She meant the basement. It was a finished basement, yes, but it was underground. Damp. Dark. It was where I stored my tools and holiday decorations. You want to put me in the basement? I repeated. In my own house? It's not a basement, Dad, Bradley said, frustration creeping into his voice. It's a mother-in-law suite. It's got its own entrance. You'd have privacy. We'd be close by to take care of you. It's perfect. And the deed? I asked. Bradley reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. I recognized the blue cover. Legal documents. He had them ready. He had them printed before his mother was even in the ground. We need to transfer the title, he said, trying to sound casual. Just for tax purposes. And to protect the asset. You know, in case you get sick and the state tries to take it. It's smarter if it's in my name. I'm your son. I'm doing this for you. For me, I echoed. Yes, Vanessa added, her eyes gleaming as she looked at the antique chandelier above us. Plus, we need the space. The condo downtown is too small for our lifestyle. And honestly, Doug, you owe it to Bradley. He's had a hard year. He deserves a break. Mom would have wanted him to have this house. She always said she wanted him to be happy. That was the trigger. Using Martha's name. Using her love to justify their greed. I looked at the envelope in Bradley's hand. I looked at his sunglasses, hiding the eyes that used to look up to me with admiration when he was a boy. Now they were hiding shame and calculation. So, the plan is, I sign the house over to you today. I moved into the basement, and you two live here, I said. Bradley smiled. A relief washed over him. He thought he had won. He thought I was the same old Doug who wrote checks whenever he crashed his car. The same father who bailed him out of credit card debt 3 times. Exactly, Dad, he said, stepping forward and placing the envelope on the coffee table. Just a few signatures. We can get a notary here by noon. Then we can order lunch. Celebrate. The new chapter. I looked at the papers. Then I looked at my son. You're right, I said softly. It is time for a new chapter. I didn't reach for the papers. I reached for my phone. But not to call a notary. I needed to confirm something first. Leave the papers, I said. Give me an hour to read them over. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Doug, it's standard boilerplate stuff. Don't be difficult. I stood up. My knees didn't crack. My back was straight. I walked over to the door and opened it. An hour, I said. Go get some coffee. Come back in 60 minutes. Bradley frowned, sensing a shift in the air, but unable to place it. Okay, Dad. An hour. But don't take too long. We have a contractor coming at 2 to look at the kitchen walls. They walked out. As soon as the Porsche roared away, I locked the door. I didn't read the papers. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what they were. I went to my desk in the study and pulled out a file key. I unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was a red folder. My lawyer, Mr. Clinton, had given it to me 5 years ago. Just in case, he had said. I never thought I would use it. I hoped I would burn it. But Bradley had made his choice. He chose the yacht. He chose the lie. He chose the greed. I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Clinton's private number. It rang twice. Clinton speaking. It's Doug Reed, I said. Doug, I'm so sorry about Martha. I was going to call you later today. Save it, I said. I need you to run a check for me. Right now. Anything, Doug. What is it? My son needs this house. He's desperate. He tried to hide it, but I saw the sweat on his forehead. He's not just greedy, Clinton. He's in trouble. I need you to find out who he owes money to. And check Martha's bank accounts, the joint savings at First National. There was a pause on the line, the sound of typing. Give me 5 minutes, Clinton said. I waited. I looked out the window at the garden Martha had planted. Her roses were in bloom. Vanessa wanted to tear them up for a pool. The phone clicked. Doug? Clinton's voice was different now. Sharp. Professional. Tell me, I said. I'm looking at the activity on the joint savings account, Clinton said. The one you and Martha kept for emergencies? Yes. It's empty, Doug. The air left the room. Empty? A withdrawal was made 3 days ago. $50,000. A cashier's check. Who signed for it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The log says Martha Reed, Clinton said. But Doug, Martha was in a coma 3 days ago. Yes, I said, she was. So it's a forgery, Clinton said. A felony. I closed my eyes. My son wasn't just a bad son. He was a criminal. He had stolen from his dying mother. And Doug, Clinton continued, I did a quick search on public records. There's a lien on Bradley's condo, and a lawsuit filed last week by a luxury boat rental company in Miami. He owes them $30,000 for damages to a yacht. I let out a short, humorless laugh. So that's why he needs the house. To mortgage it. To pay for the party he threw while I was burying his mother. Doug, what do you want to do? Clinton asked. Do you want me to call the police? No, I said. Not yet. The police are too quick. I want him to understand what he's done. I want him to feel it. I looked at the clock. 40 minutes left. Clinton, I said, bring the file, the trust file, and bring the eviction notice template, the one we joked about. You're serious? I'm deadly serious. Meet me here in 30 minutes. Park around the back. I don't want them to see your car. I hung up. I walked back to the living room. I looked at the spot where the coffin had been in the funeral home. Then I looked at the spot where Bradley had stood demanding my home. They wanted a show. They wanted a celebration. They wanted a new chapter. I sat back down in the armchair. I waited for the Porsche to return. The grief was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't a father anymore. I was a judge. And the court was now in session. 60 minutes. That was the timeline I had given them, and that was the timeline they respected to the second. The Porsche pulled back into the driveway exactly 1 hour later. I watched from the window as the engine cut off. They did not get out immediately. I could see them arguing inside the car. Anna was gesturing wildly, her hands chopping the air, while Bradley rubbed his temples, looking like a man trapped between a rock and a hard place. He was weak. He had always been weak. But weakness, when manipulated by the wrong person, can become dangerous. They finally stepped out. The change in their demeanor was instant. The argument vanished, replaced by practiced smiles and a veneer of concern that was so thin it was transparent. They walked up the porch steps. I didn't get up to open the door. I let them use their key. I wanted to see how comfortable they felt walking into a house they believed they already owned. Bradley entered first, holding a latte in one hand and a brown paper bag in the other. Peace offerings. Pathetic ones. Vanessa followed, the blue legal folder tucked under her arm like a weapon. "Hey, Dad," Bradley said, his voice overly cheerful. "We brought you a scone. Blueberry. Your favorite." I didn't look at the bag. I looked at the folder. "Sit down," I said. They sat. The air in the living room was heavy, charged with the static of things unsaid. Bradley placed the coffee on a coaster. Vanessa placed the folder on the table, right on top of the coaster, pushing the coffee aside. She was done pretending. "So, Doug," she started, crossing her legs, "did you have a chance to review the papers? It's a very generous offer. Most children wouldn't even offer the basement suite. They'd just put you in a home." I looked at her. Her eyes were cold, devoid of any empathy. She spoke about me as if I were a piece of furniture that needed to be moved into storage. "I reviewed them," I said. "And?" Bradley leaned forward, hope flickering in his eyes. I reached for the folder. I opened it slowly. I saw the lines waiting for my signature. Grantor, beneficiary, transfer of deed, irrevocable. I looked up at my son. "I'm not signing this, Bradley." The room went silent. The hope in Bradley's eyes died, replaced by panic. Vanessa didn't panic. She stiffened. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "What do you mean you're not signing?" Bradley stammered. "Dad, we talked about this. You can't live here alone. It's too much work. We're trying to help you." I closed the folder and slid it back across the table. "I don't need your help," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And I certainly don't need to live in my own basement while you throw parties upstairs. The answer is no. Get your own house. You're 35 years old." Vanessa laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. She reached into her purse and pulled out a different document. This one wasn't in a blue folder. It was just a staple-bound stack of papers. She threw it on the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "I told you he would be difficult, Bradley," she said, not looking at me, but at her husband. "I told you the grief has affected his mind." She turned to me. Her voice dropped an octave. It wasn't polite anymore. It was threatening. "You don't get it, do you, Doug? We weren't asking. We were being nice. But if you want to play the stubborn old man card, we can play the concerned family card." She tapped the new stack of papers with a manicured fingernail. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. I didn't answer. "It's a petition for guardianship," she said, savoring the word. "We spoke to a specialist this morning. You're 70. You just lost your wife. You're displaying erratic behavior, isolation, aggression, refusing help from family. In the state of Florida, that's enough to trigger an evaluation." My blood ran cold. I knew about guardianship. I had seen it happen to friends. A court declares you incapacitated. Someone else takes control of your checkbook, your medical decisions, your assets. You become a prisoner in your own life. "You think a judge will believe you?" I asked, gripping the arms of my chair. "I'm perfectly sane." Bradley looked down at his shoes. Vanessa answered for him. "Bradley is your only son," she said smoothly. "He's grieving too, and he's so worried about his father's mental decline. If we testify that you're forgetting things, that you're leaving the stove on, that you're becoming violent, who do you think the court will believe? The loving son and daughter-in-law who just want to keep you safe? Or the angry, confused old widower?" She leaned in closer. "We can drag this out in court, Doug. We can freeze your accounts pending the investigation. We can have you placed in a temporary care facility for observation. That's a nice way of saying a psychiatric ward. Or you can sign the deed transfer today, live comfortably in the basement, and see your grandchildren, if we ever decide to have them." I looked at Bradley. He refused to meet my gaze. He was letting her do this. He was letting her threaten to strip away my dignity, my freedom, just to cover his debts. "Get out," I said. My voice was a low growl. "Get out of my house. Now." Vanessa didn't move. She checked her watch. "Actually," she said, looking at the window, "we're not going anywhere. And neither are you." A loud drilling sound erupted from the front door. I jumped up. I hadn't heard a car pull up. I rushed to the hallway. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I saw a silhouette. A man in a blue uniform. He was drilling into the deadbolt. "What is that?" I shouted, turning back to them. "A locksmith," Vanessa said calmly. "We're changing the locks. For your safety, of course. You've been so forgetful lately, losing keys. We can't have the house unsecured." I ran to the door and threw it open. A young man in a jumpsuit looked up, startled. He had a new smart lock mechanism in his hand. "Stop!" I commanded. "Get away from my door." The man looked past me, towards Bradley. Mr. Reed?" he asked. Bradley stepped into the hallway. He finally looked at me, and there was a hardness in his face I had never seen before. Desperation makes men do terrible things. "It's okay," he told the locksmith. "My father is just confused. He's having an episode. Just finish the job. Here's the work order. I'm the owner." He waved the unsigned deed. The locksmith didn't check the signature. He just saw a man in a suit and an old man yelling. He nodded and went back to drilling. I stepped back, my heart hammering against my ribs. I turned to the back door. "Don't bother," Vanessa called out from the living room. "We had the back gate programmed with a new code while you were staring at the papers. The perimeter is secured." I was trapped. In the house I built, with the people who wanted to steal it. I looked at them. They stood together in my hallway, a united front of greed. They thought they had checkmated me. They thought that by changing the locks and threatening my sanity, they had stripped me of my power. They thought I was just a helpless old man who would fold under pressure. They were wrong. I took a deep breath. I forced my hands to stop shaking. I walked past them, back into the living room. "Fine," I said. "You win." Vanessa smiled. A victorious, predatory smile. "I knew you'd see reason, Doug." "I need a moment," I said, "to process this. I'll go to my study." "Take your time," Bradley said, his voice instantly returning to that fake cheerfulness. "We'll order pizza. Celebration dinner, right?" I walked into my study and closed the door. I heard the lock click. Not the lock on the door, but the sound of the front door's smart lock beeping. It was engaged. I was a prisoner. But they forgot one thing. A prisoner with a phone is not helpless. And a father who has just realized his son is an enemy is not a victim. He is a soldier. I sat at my desk. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I reached for the drawer where I kept my old business contacts. I didn't call the police. That would be too messy, and Vanessa was right. Guardianship battles are ugly. I needed something cleaner, something sharper. I picked up the phone. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Mr. Clinton," I whispered when he answered. "Doug? Is everything all right?" "No," I said, watching the door handle to make sure they weren't listening. "It's not all right. But it's about to be. I need you to open the file." "And Clinton?" "Yes?" "Prepare the war chest. I'm going to bury them." I hung up the phone. Outside, I could hear them laughing. They were opening a bottle of wine. My wine. Let them drink. Let them celebrate. Because tomorrow, the hangover wouldn't just be a headache. It would be an eviction. I did not storm out of the house. Angry men make mistakes, and I could not afford a single error. I walked past Bradley in the hallway. He was holding a tape measure against the wall, already planning where to hang a 60-inch television in a house he did not yet own. He looked up, a smug grin plastered on his face, thinking my retreat into the study had been a sign of surrender. Going to the bank to notarize the transfer. "Dad?" he asked, his voice dripping with false victory. I stopped. I looked at him. Really looked at him. I saw the expensive watch on his wrist that he couldn't afford. I saw the desperation hidden behind his arrogance. "I am going for a drive," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "I need fresh air." Vanessa stepped out of the kitchen, holding a glass of my best red wine. "Don't be too long," she said, taking a sip. "We have the contractors coming at 4. I didn't answer. I grabbed my truck keys from the hook and walked out into the humid Florida afternoon. The drive to Mr. Clinton's office was a blur of gray highways and red traffic lights. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I wasn't thinking about the house anymore. I was thinking about the phone call I had made from the study. Clinton had sounded urgent. He told me to come immediately. He told me that what he found wasn't just a financial irregularity, it was a smoking gun. Clinton's office was in a quiet brick building downtown, the kind of place that smelled of old paper and serious money. His secretary didn't ask me to wait. She looked at me with sympathetic eyes and pointed straight to the heavy oak door at the end of the hall. Clinton was standing by the window when I entered. He turned around. He didn't smile. He didn't offer me a drink. On his desk sat a single file folder, open. "Sit down, Doug," he said. I sat. The leather chair creaked in the silence. "You asked me to check the accounts," Clinton began, walking over to his desk. "You suspected they were in debt. You were right. But Doug, debt is not a crime. Being stupid with money is not a crime. What I found in the joint savings account at First National, however, is a crime. A felony, to be precise." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a photocopy of a withdrawal slip. I picked it up. My eyes scanned the numbers. $50,000. A cashier's check issued to cash. It was a massive sum. That money was our safety net. It was the money Martha and I had saved for medical emergencies, for end-of-life care. "Look at the date," Clinton said softly. I looked. Tuesday, October 14th. My breath hitched in my throat. Tuesday. I remember Tuesday. Tuesday was the day the doctors told me there was nothing more they could do. Tuesday was the day they increased Martha's morphine drip. Tuesday was the day she slipped into the coma from which she never woke up. I looked at the bottom of the slip. There was a signature. Martha Reed. I stared at the ink. It was shaky. The loops on the M were uneven. The tail of the R trailed off. It looked like the handwriting of a weak, dying woman. It looked convincing. To a bank teller who didn't know her, it would pass. To a stranger, it looked like an elderly woman signing a check with a trembling hand. But I was her husband. I knew every curve of her handwriting. I had watched her sign birthday cards, tax returns, and letters for 40 years. And I knew with absolute certainty that on Tuesday, Martha could not lift a finger. Her hands were swollen. She was unconscious. "This is a forgery," I whispered. The room felt suddenly very cold. Clinton nodded grimly. "I know." I called the bank manager. I told him I was conducting an audit of the estate. I asked who presented this withdrawal slip. He paused, letting the weight of the revelation hang in the air. "It was a woman," Clinton said. "Blonde, mid-20s. She had Martha's ID. She claimed to be her niece helping her aunt with bills. She wore big sunglasses and a scarf. The teller remembered her because she was rude. She demanded the check in large bills." "Vanessa," I said. The name tasted like bile in my mouth. "And the driver waiting outside in the Porsche?" Clinton asked. "Bradley," I answered. I put the paper down. The picture was complete. While I was sitting by Martha's bedside, holding her hand, praying for a miracle, my son and his wife were at the bank, impersonating a dying woman to steal her life savings. They didn't just wait for her to die. They robbed her while she was taking her last breaths. They financed their yacht party with the money we saved for her funeral. "This isn't just theft," Doug Clinton said, his voice hard. "This is elder abuse. This is identity theft. This is bank fraud. If we take this to the district attorney, they will go to prison. Not for a few months, for years." I looked at the signature again. Martha Reed. It was a violation so deep it made the loss of the house feel insignificant. They had touched her legacy. They had used her name to feed their greed. "Do you want me to call the police?" Clinton asked, his hand hovering over the phone. "We have the evidence. The bank cameras will confirm it. We can have them arrested within the hour." I closed my eyes. I imagined the police cars pulling up to my house. I imagined the handcuffs. It would be justice. Fast, brutal justice. But it wasn't enough. Prison would be too easy for them. They would play the victim. They would cry to the press. They would say they were desperate, that it was a misunderstanding, and eventually, they would get out. "No," I said, opening my eyes. Clinton looked surprised. "Doug, they stole $50,000. "I know," I said, standing up. "And I will get it back. Every single cent. But I don't just want them in jail, Clinton. I want them broken. I want them to lose everything they think they have. I want them to feel the ground crumble beneath their feet." I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. People were walking by, living their normal lives, unaware that monsters existed. "If I arrest them now, they lose their freedom," I said. "But if I wait, if I let them think they've won, I can take more than their freedom. I can take their future." I turned back to Clinton. "You said the house is in a trust," I asked. Clinton nodded. "The Reed Family Living Trust. You and Martha are the trustees." "And the clause?" I asked. "The one we added 5 years ago when Bradley got his second DUI? Clinton smiled, a shark-like grin that matched my own mood. "The disinheritance clause. It's ironclad, Doug. If the beneficiary acts in a way that brings moral turpitude or harm to the grantors, or fails to perform basic familial duties—" "Like missing a funeral to go to a party?" I interrupted. "Exactly," Clinton said. "Or stealing from a comatose mother." "Good," I said. "Keep the file open, but don't file the police report yet. I need one more thing." "What is it?" "I need to become their creditor," I said. "You told me Bradley has a lien on his condo. Who holds the debt?" "A secondary lender, high-risk outfit. They'd be happy to sell the note for cash." "Buy it," I said. "Buy it under the LLC name. Buy it today. I want to own the roof over his head." Clinton tapped his pen on the desk. "You're going to evict him from both houses, aren't you?" I picked up the photocopy of the forged check. I folded it neatly and put it in my pocket, right next to my heart. "He tried to bury me in the basement," I said. "So I'm going to bury him in paperwork." I walked to the door. Doug Clinton called out, "Be careful. They are desperate. If they find out you know—" "Let them find out," I said. "But not until I have the pen in my hand." I walked out of the office. The sun was setting now, casting long, dark shadows across the city. I wasn't just an old man anymore. I was a hunter. I got back into my truck and turned the key. The engine roared to life. I was going back to the house. I was going back to the snake pit. But this time, I wasn't bringing a scone. I was bringing a war. I parked my truck a block away from the house. I needed the walk. I needed the physical exertion to burn off the adrenaline that was coursing through my veins after the meeting with Mr. Clinton. The evening air was thick and humid, sticking to my skin like a second layer of grief. As I approached my home, the place where I had raised a family and loved a woman for 40 years, it didn't look like a sanctuary anymore. It looked like a crime scene. The windows were dark, except for the master bedroom upstairs, Martha's bedroom. The light was blazing, casting a harsh, artificial glow onto the front lawn. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why were they in the master bedroom? We had agreed, or at least I had let them believe I agreed, that they would stay in the guest room until the paperwork was signed. That room was sacred. Martha's perfume bottles were still on the vanity. Her reading glasses were still on the nightstand, marking page 112 of a romance novel she would never finish. I unlocked the front door. The new smart lock beeped a cheerful, mocking welcome. Inside, the house was silent, but it was a heavy silence, the kind that precedes a storm. Then I heard it. A thud. The sound of something heavy hitting the floorboards above my head. Then the distinct, crinkling sound of plastic trash bags. I took the stairs 2 at a time. My knees protested, aching with a sharp, stinging pain, but I ignored them. I reached the landing and saw the door to the master bedroom standing wide open. Vanessa was there. She was standing in front of the walk-in closet, the closet Martha had organized by color and season. Vanessa was holding a black industrial trash bag open with one hand, and with the other, she was pulling hangers off the rack. She wasn't folding the clothes. She wasn't packing them into boxes for donation. She was grabbing fistfuls of silk, wool, and cotton, my wife's life in fabric form, and shoving them into the garbage bag like they were rotten leaves. "Stop!" I roared. The word tore out of my throat, raw and jagged. Vanessa jumped, dropping a blue velvet dress onto the floor. It was the dress Martha wore to our 40th anniversary dinner. I remembered zipping it up for her. I remembered how she spun around in front of the mirror and asked if she still looked beautiful. Vanessa turned to me. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed, like a teenager caught doing a chore she hated. "Jesus, Doug, you scared me half to death," she snapped, kicking the blue dress aside with her foot. "What are you doing?" I walked into the room, my hands trembling. Not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it was melting my bones. "That is Martha's clothing. You have no right to touch it." "I'm clearing out the clutter," Vanessa said, bending down to pick up a stack of shoe boxes. "If we're going to move in here, we need space. And frankly, Doug, this room smells like a nursing home. It's mothballs and stale lavender. It's depressing." She tossed the shoe boxes into the bag. I heard the sound of heels clicking against each other. Martha's dancing shoes. "Put it back," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Take it out of the bag and hang it back up." Vanessa rolled her eyes. She let out a sigh that was pure condescension. "Oh, for God's sake, be realistic. She's dead, Doug. She doesn't need coats. She doesn't need shoes. And you certainly don't need a shrine to a dead woman taking up 60% of the closet space. I'm doing you a favor. I'm ripping off the Band-Aid." She reached for the top shelf, grabbing a white box. I knew what was in there. It was her wedding veil, preserved in tissue paper. "No!" I shouted. I lunged forward. I didn't think, I just reacted. I grabbed the box from her hand before she could crush it into the trash bag. "Don't you dare touch that," I hissed, clutching the box to my chest. Vanessa recoiled, her face twisting into a mask of shock and anger. "You're crazy!" she screamed. "Bradley! Bradley, get up here! Your father is attacking me!" I wasn't attacking her. I was protecting the only things I had left. But the truth didn't matter to them. Bradley appeared in the doorway a second later. He was holding a beer. He looked from Vanessa, who was clutching her pearls in a dramatic pose of victimhood, to me standing there hugging a white box like a lifeline. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" Bradley demanded, stepping into the room. He grabbed my arm, digging his fingers into my bicep. "She is throwing away your mother's things," I said, pointing at the black bags. "Look at this, Bradley. That's her anniversary dress. Those are her shoes. She's throwing them in the garbage." Bradley looked at the bags. For a split second, I saw a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. He recognized the blue dress, too. But then he looked at Vanessa. She shot him a look that was pure venom, a silent command that said, "Whose side are you on?" Bradley made his choice. He always made the wrong choice. "Babe is right, Dad," he said, his voice hardening. "We need the space. Mom isn't coming back. You need to let go." "He's crazy, Bradley," Vanessa shrieked. "He grabbed my wrist. He almost hit me." "I did not touch her," I argued, turning to my son. "I just took the box." "Give it to me, Dad," Bradley said, reaching for the wedding veil. "No." "Give it to me," Bradley shouted. He grabbed the box. I held on. We were wrestling, father and son, fighting over a box of old lace in a room that still smelled like the woman who loved us both. "Let go, you stubborn old man," Bradley yelled. And then he did it. He didn't just pull the box. He shoved me. It was a hard, two-handed push against my chest. I wasn't expecting it. I lost my balance. My feet tangled in the blue velvet dress on the floor. I fell backward. I hit the ground hard. My hip slammed against the floorboards. The breath was knocked out of me. A sharp bolt of pain shot up my spine. The box flew from my hands and landed upside down, the delicate lace spilling out onto the carpet. Silence slammed into the room. I lay there, staring up at the ceiling. I looked at the crown molding I had installed myself 30 years ago. I listened to the sound of my own ragged breathing. Bradley stood over me. His hands were still raised, frozen in the position of the shove. He looked down at his hands, then at me. He looked terrified. Not because he had hurt me, but because he had crossed a line he could never uncross. Vanessa broke the silence. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't call for help. "See," she said, her voice dripping with justification. "He's unstable. He tripped. You saw him trip, right, Bradley? He attacked me, and then he tripped." Bradley blinked. He lowered his hands. He swallowed hard. "Yeah," he mumbled. "Yeah, he tripped." He looked down at me, his face closing off. "Get up, Dad. Stop being dramatic." I didn't move immediately. I lay there, feeling the throbbing in my hip. But something else was happening. The anger that had been consuming me, the hot, fiery rage, was suddenly gone. In its place was something cold, something absolute. Until that moment, a small, foolish part of me had still hoped. Hoped that my son was just misguided. Hoped that he was just under Vanessa's spell and would snap out of it. But a man who shoves his 70-year-old father to the floor to please a woman who mocks his dead mother. That man is gone. My son died when he pushed me. The man standing above me was a stranger, and strangers do not get mercy. I realized then that eviction wasn't enough. Taking the money back wasn't enough. I had to destroy them completely. And to do that, I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think they had broken me. I groaned. I rolled onto my side and slowly, painfully, pushed myself up to a sitting position. I looked at Bradley. I didn't glare. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face crumble into a mask of defeat. "You're right," I whispered, my voice shaking. Bradley blinked. "What?" "You're right," I said, looking at the spilled veil. I'm living in the past. It's hard, son." I saw the tension leave Bradley's shoulders. He exhaled. "I know it's hard, Dad," he said, his voice softening, regaining that condescending tone. "But we have to move forward." I nodded. I reached out a hand. "Help me up, please." Bradley stepped forward and pulled me up. His grip was firm, pretending to be supportive. I dusted off my pants. I looked at Vanessa. "I'm sorry," I lied. "I'm sorry I yelled. I'm just tired. I'm an old man and I'm tired of fighting." Vanessa smirked. She won. That's all she cared about. "Apology accepted, Doug," she said, kicking the last of the clothes into the bag. "Just let us handle the packing from now on." I looked at Bradley. "I'll sign," I said. Bradley's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes," I said. "I'll sign the deed. I'll move downstairs. Just, let's have a nice dinner tonight. One last dinner as a family before the changes. I'll make steaks. We can sign the papers over dessert." Bradley grinned. He looked like a child who just got away with murder. "That sounds great, Dad. Steaks sound great." Vanessa tied the knot on the trash bag. "Perfect," she said. "I'll open a bottle of red. A good one this time." I watched them. They were giddy. They were celebrating their victory. They had no idea that I wasn't surrendering. I was loading the gun. "I'll go start the grill," I said quietly. I walked out of the bedroom. I limped slightly, exaggerating the injury just enough to look pathetic. As I walked down the hallway, I passed the guest bathroom. I paused and looked in the mirror. The man staring back at me didn't look tired. He looked dangerous. I went downstairs to the kitchen. I didn't reach for the steaks. I reached for my pocket. I pulled out the small digital voice recorder I had bought at the electronics store on my way back from Clinton's office. I checked the battery. Full. I pressed the record button. The tiny red light blinked once, then vanished. I slipped it into the breast pocket of my shirt, behind my handkerchief. They wanted a dinner. I would give them a dinner. It would be a meal they would choke on for the rest of their lives. The trap was set. All they had to do was walk into it. And I knew, with the certainty of a man who has nothing left to lose, that their own greed would lead them right to the slaughter. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time. I was not looking at my reflection to admire it. I was studying it. I needed to see what they saw. I saw the gray hair, the lines etched deep around my eyes, the slight stoop in my shoulders that came from 40 years of carrying lumber and drywall. I needed to use this. For the next hour, Douglas Reed, the man who once stared down union bosses and hurricane winds, had to die. In his place, I needed to become Doug. the frightened, feeble old man who was terrified of dying alone in a state-run facility. I practiced a tremor in my right hand. I let my jaw go slack. I slumped my posture, shrinking 2 inches in height. It was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. It went against every fiber of my being to show weakness to enemies, especially when those enemies were sleeping under my roof. But I remembered the red light on the voice recorder in my pocket. I remembered the forged check. I was an actor now, and this was the performance of my life. I walked out of the bathroom. I shuffled my feet, letting them drag slightly on the carpet. I made my way to the kitchen. The smell of the steaks I had put on the grill earlier wafted in, mixing with the scent of their expensive, cloying perfume. They were sitting at the kitchen island. Vanessa was scrolling on her phone, looking bored. Bradley was nursing a beer, staring into the middle distance. When I entered, the conversation died. I didn't look them in the eye. I looked at the floor. "I don't want to go," I whispered. My voice cracked perfectly. Vanessa looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Go where, Doug?" "To the home," I said, looking up at her with pleading eyes. You said if I didn't sign, you would petition for guardianship. You said you would put me in a facility. Please, I can't go there. I promised Martha I would die in this house." I saw the change in Vanessa's face instantly. The tension in her jaw relaxed. Her shoulders dropped. She smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the satisfied smirk of a predator that sees the prey expose its throat. She nudged Bradley. "See?" she mouthed to him. "I told you." Bradley turned to me. He looked relieved. The guilt I had seen earlier was gone, washed away by the convenience of my surrender. "Dad, nobody wants to put you in a home," Bradley said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone people use with children. "We just want you safe. If you sign the papers, we can all stay here together. We can take care of you." I nodded slowly, letting my hand shake as I reached for the counter to steady myself. "Okay," I said. "Okay, I'll sign. I want one last dinner, like we used to, before everything changes." Vanessa sighed, checking her manicured nails. "Fine, but let's make it quick. We have a lot of paperwork to get through tonight." I set the table. I didn't use the everyday placemats. I went to the china cabinet and pulled out the Lenox porcelain with the gold rim. These were the plates Martha had bought for our 25th anniversary. We only used them for Christmas and Thanksgiving. Placing them on the table felt like a sacrilege, like serving pearls to swine. But I needed the atmosphere to be perfect. I needed them to feel like they were already the masters of the house. I brought the steaks in from the patio. I had overcooked them on purpose, charred on the outside, dry on the inside. The Doug Reed they knew was a master at the grill. The Doug Reed they saw tonight was a man losing his touch. We sat down. The dining room was dim, lit only by the chandelier. The empty chair at the end of the table, Martha's chair, loomed large in the shadows. Vanessa cut into her steak and immediately wrinkled her nose. "My God, Doug," she said, dropping her fork with a clatter. "This is like shoe leather. Did you forget to watch the timer?" I lowered my head. "I'm sorry," I mumbled. "My mind, it wanders lately. I forget things." Bradley chewed methodically, ignoring his wife's rudeness. He was too focused on the prize. "It's fine, Dad," he said. "It's good. Don't worry about it." I poured the wine. I made sure to spill a few drops on the white tablecloth as I filled Vanessa's glass. Watch it, she snapped, pulling her dress away. Jesus, you really are losing it, aren't you? I sat down, clutching my napkin. I looked small. I looked defeated. So, Vanessa said, taking a long gulp of wine. The assets. Bradley said you mentioned stocks? I nodded. I reached into my pocket and touched the recorder to make sure it was still running. Then I pulled out a small notebook. I have the house, I said, my voice trembling. But there are also the bonds, and the retirement accounts, and the rainy day fund. I saw their eyes light up. It was a physical reaction. Their pupils dilated. They leaned forward, drawn in by the scent of money like sharks to blood. How much? Bradley asked. The question hung in the air, naked and greedy. I don't know exactly, I lied. Maybe $500,000? Maybe more. I haven't looked since your mother got sick. Vanessa choked on her wine. She coughed, eyes widening. $500,000? I wanted to give it all to you, I continued. I wanted to leave a legacy. But now, I just want to stay in my room. I just want peace. If I give you everything, will you promise not to send me away? Vanessa reached across the table and patted my hand. Her skin was cold. Oh, Doug, she cooed. Of course. You give us control of the assets, and you can stay in the basement as long as you want. We'll even hire a nurse to come check on you, so you don't burn the house down cooking steaks like this. Bradley nodded eagerly. Yeah, Dad, we'll take care of everything. You won't have to worry about a single bill. Just sign the power of attorney and the deed transfer. I looked at my son. I looked at the man who I had taught to ride a bike, the man I had taught to fish in the creek behind this house. I was giving him a chance. A final, microscopic chance to say, Dad, keep your money. We just want to be with you. But he didn't say that. Where are the papers? Bradley asked. I pointed to the sideboard where Vanessa had left her blue folder. They are right there, I said. Vanessa stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She grabbed the folder and a pen. She slapped them down on the table, right next to the overcooked steak. Sign here, she said, pointing to the line. And here. And initial here. I picked up the pen. My hand shook violently. I wasn't faking the shaking anymore. The rage was trying to break out, trying to steady my hand and drive the pen through the table. I had to force myself to breathe. I looked at the document. Quitclaim deed. General power of attorney. They watched the tip of the pen like it was the needle on a bomb. Wait, I said, pulling the pen back. Vanessa hissed. What now? I want to know one thing, I said, looking at Bradley. What, Dad? Just sign it. Why did you really need the money? I asked softly. Was it really for a fresh start? Or are you in trouble, son? Bradley stiffened. He looked at Vanessa. It's just for the future, Dad, he lied. We want to invest. Build something for our family. I looked at Vanessa. And you? You really think of me as family? Vanessa smiled, but her eyes were dead. You're Bradley's father, Doug. That makes us family. Now sign. I looked down at the paper. They had lied to the end. They had chosen greed over truth, money over blood. Okay, I whispered. I lowered the pen to the paper. But I didn't sign my name. I didn't sign Douglas Reed. I wrote something else. I wrote it slowly, deliberately, letting the pen carve into the paper. They couldn't see what I was writing because my hand was covering it. "Done," I said. I closed the folder. I kept my hand on it. Vanessa reached for it. "Let me see." "Not yet," I said, my voice suddenly losing its tremor. My back straightened. I looked up, and for the first time all night, I let the mask drop. I let them see the ice in my eyes. "There is one more thing," I said, my voice steady and strong. "What?" Bradley asked, sensing the shift. He pulled back slightly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the checkbook. My checkbook. "I forgot the signing bonus," I said. I wrote out a check. I tore it off with a sharp rip. I slid the folder and the check across the table to them. Vanessa snatched the folder. Bradley grabbed the check. Vanessa opened the folder. She looked at the signature line. Her face went pale, then red, then purple. "What is this?" she screamed. She turned the document around. On the line where my signature should have been, I had written 4 words in block letters. "Not in this lifetime." Bradley looked at the check in his hand. He read the amount. $1? He stammered. I stood up. I didn't use the table for support. I stood tall, looming over them in the dim light. "That's for the steak," I said coldly. "Now get out of my chair. The owner of the house is done eating." The silence in the dining room was broken only by the screech of serrated knives against the fine porcelain. It was a terrible sound, like nails on a chalkboard, but it was fitting for a meal that tasted like ash in my mouth. I watched them eat. Bradley was struggling with the overcooked meat, sawing at it with a grim determination, while Vanessa had pushed hers to the side after 2 bites, opting instead to drain her 3rd glass of wine. The bottle of Cabernet I had opened, a vintage I had been saving for a grandchild's christening, was already empty. Vanessa reached for the 2nd bottle, the cork popping with a festive sound that echoed obscenely in the quiet house. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, my thumb tracing the outline of the small device in my pocket. The red light was blinking against the fabric of my shirt, a silent heartbeat of justice. I needed them to speak. I needed them to fill the silence with their truth. I cleared my throat. The sound made Bradley jump slightly. He looked at me, his eyes glassy. "Is it enough?" I asked softly, keeping my voice tremulous. Bradley blinked. "Is what enough, Dad? The steak? Yeah, it's great, really filling." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "The assets, the house, the stocks. Is it enough to fix whatever is wrong?" Vanessa set her glass down hard. Wine sloshed over the rim, staining the white tablecloth red. She looked at me, her eyes narrowed but lacking focus. "What do you mean, fix whatever is wrong?" she slurred slightly. "Nothing is wrong, Doug. We are expanding. We are investing." I looked down at my plate. I acted as if I was ashamed to ask. "It's just," I said, pausing for effect. "I saw the way you looked when you came in this morning. You looked scared, son. And the locksmith, that cost money. You seemed desperate." Bradley laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "We aren't scared, Dad. We're ambitious. There's a difference. You wouldn't understand. You spent 40 years working with a hammer. We work with leverage." "Leverage," I repeated. "Is that what you call it?" Vanessa leaned forward. Her inhibitions were drowning in the Cabernet. She wanted to brag. I could see it in the way she smirked. "You have no idea how the world works now, Doug," she said. "You save pennies in a jar. We make moves. Big moves. But big moves require capital. And frankly, sitting on this much equity while you watch daytime TV is a waste. It's a sin against economics. I nodded, acting the part of the ignorant old man. So, the debts, I ventured. The rumors I heard about the boat? Bradley froze. His fork hovered halfway to his mouth. Who told you about the boat? I shrugged, making myself look small. People talk, son. At the hardware store. Someone mentioned a rental agency in Miami. Something about an accident. Vanessa threw her head back and laughed. It was a cruel, harsh sound. An accident, she mocked. That's one way to put it. It was a party, Doug. A legendary party. We had 30 people on a 60-foot catamaran. The captain was an idiot. He didn't secure the anchor. We drifted. Maybe we hit a pier. Maybe we didn't. Who cares? It's insured. Bradley put his fork down. He looked at Vanessa, then at me. He decided to own it. He decided that since I was signing everything over anyway, he didn't need to hide his brilliance. It wasn't just a pier, Dad, he said, puffing out his chest. We took out a section of a private dock, and yeah, the deposit didn't cover it. They wanted 30 grand cash or they were going to press charges for negligence. 30 grand, I whispered. That's a lot of money. Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. It's chump change. Or it should be, if your son wasn't so terrible at poker. Bradley's face flushed. Shut up, Ness. Oh, don't be sensitive, she teased, poking him in the arm. Tell him, Bradley. Tell your daddy how you lost the condo payment on a flush that didn't flush. I felt a cold rage tightening my chest. My son wasn't just unlucky. He was a gambler. You gambled away the mortgage? I asked. Bradley looked at me, defensive. It was a sure thing, Dad. I had pocket kings. It was a bad beat. It happens to pros all the time. I just needed a bridge loan. That's why we're here. Once we get the title to this place, I can get a line of credit, pay off the boat guys, pay off the condo arrears, and we're back on top. I looked at him. He spoke about mortgaging my home, the home Martha died in, as if it were simply a matter of moving numbers on a spreadsheet. But what about the savings? I asked. I needed to guide them to the forgery. I needed the confession on tape. I looked at Vanessa. Martha always said we had a safety net, I said, at First National. She told me there was over $50,000 in there. I was going to use it for the funeral expenses, but when I looked for the passbook, I couldn't find it. The room went silent. Vanessa stopped swirling her wine. Bradley looked at his plate. I let the silence stretch. I let it become uncomfortable. Then I added the bait. I must have been mistaken, I mumbled. Maybe she spent it on treatments. Maybe there was never any money there at all. I'm so confused lately. Vanessa snorted. She couldn't help herself. She was too proud of her cleverness to let me think I was right. She didn't spend it, Doug, she said, a wicked smile playing on her lips. It didn't just disappear. Bradley reached out and touched her arm. Vanessa, don't. She shook him off. Why not? He's signing the papers tonight. It's all going to the same pot anyway. We're just consolidating assets early. She turned her gaze to me. Her eyes were glittering with malice. The money is safe, Doug. We moved it. You moved it? I asked, feigning innocence. But that account required 2 signatures, mine or Martha's, and I didn't sign anything. And Martha was in a coma. Vanessa giggled. It was the sound of a child who had gotten away with stealing candy. Only the candy was my life savings. You'd be amazed what a pair of sunglasses and a headscarf can do, she said. I walked into that bank on Tuesday. I had her ID. I had her checkbook. The teller was some 20-year-old kid who didn't know Martha from Adam. I coughed a few times, acted frail, signed the slip, and voila, cashier's check. I gripped the napkin in my lap so hard my knuckles turned white. "You pretended to be her?" I whispered. "While she was dying?" Bradley finally spoke up. He didn't sound ashamed. He sounded practical. "We had to, Dad. The boat guys were threatening to call the cops. We needed the cash that day. If we waited for, for nature to take its course, probate would have taken months. We would have lost the condo. We did what we had to do to survive." "To survive," I repeated. "You stole from your mother on her deathbed to pay for a yacht crash." Bradley slammed his hand on the table. "We didn't steal. It's my inheritance. I'm the only son. It was going to be mine anyway. We just expedited the process. Why are you making this such a big deal? You're getting the basement. You're getting fed. You should be thanking us for handling the finances so you don't have to." I looked at him. He actually believed it. He had twisted his morality so significantly that he saw himself as the victim. "And Martha?" I asked. "What would she say?" Vanessa rolled her eyes so hard I thought they would get stuck. "Oh, stop with the St. Martha routine," she spat. "She would have given it to Bradley anyway. She spoiled him rotten. That was her problem. She was weak. She held on to things. Look at this house, Doug. It's a mausoleum. It's filled with junk. That walk-in closet? It's pathetic. Who keeps a wedding dress for 40 years? It's just fabric. It's rotting, just like she was." The words hung in the air. Poisonous, irreversible. "She was not weak," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "She was the strongest woman I ever knew." Vanessa scoffed. "She was a doormat, and she raised a son who needs a strong woman to guide him because she never taught him how to be a man. She just taught him how to be nice. Nice doesn't pay the bills, Doug. Nice doesn't get you a table at the club." She took another sip of wine, draining the glass. "Honestly," she continued, leaning back in her chair, kicking her shoes off under the table, "it's a relief she's gone. Now we can finally clean up this mess. We're going to gut this floor. Open concept, white marble. No more dusty books. No more old lady smell. We're going to erase all this mediocrity." I looked at Bradley. I waited for him to defend his mother. I waited for him to slam his fist on the table and tell his wife to shut her mouth. He didn't. He just nodded. "Vanessa has a great vision for the place, Dad," he said weakly. "It's going to be really modern. You'll see. It'll increase the value by 20%. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pain anymore. It was the heavy, final click of a lock snapping shut. The last thread of attachment I had to them was severed. "You're right," I said. I looked at the recorder in my pocket, visualizing the tape spinning, capturing every syllable of their confession. The forgery, the gambling, the disrespect, it was all there. I stood up slowly. I picked up the empty wine bottle. "You're absolutely right," I said. "It's time to clean up the mess." Vanessa held out her glass. "Open another one, Doug," she commanded. "We need to toast to the renovations." I looked at her glass. I looked at her face, flushed with alcohol and greed. "No," I said. "I think you've had enough." Vanessa's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" I walked over to the sideboard. I didn't reach for the wine. I reached for the dessert I had promised. But there was no cake. There was only the blue folder. "The signing," Bradley said, rubbing his hands together. "Right. Let's get it done." I picked up the folder. I walked back to the table. I stood at the head, the place where I had presided over family dinners for decades. I looked at the document one last time. "You admitted it," I said softly. "Admitted what?" Bradley asked, reaching for a pen. "You admitted you forged her signature," I said, "on Tuesday, at First National." Vanessa froze. Her eyes darted to mine. A flicker of sobriety cut through the haze. "So what?" she challenged. "Who are you going to tell? The bank?" "They don't care. It's done." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of the executioner. "You're right," I said. "The bank might not care about a family dispute, but the district attorney cares about felony fraud. And the IRS cares about undeclared income. And the probate court, oh, the probate court cares very much about unworthy heirs." Bradley stood up. His chair fell backward with a crash. "What are you talking about, Dad? Just give me the pen." I didn't give him the pen. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the recorder. I held it up. The little red light was still blinking. I pressed the stop button. The click sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. Vanessa's face went white. All the color drained from her cheeks, leaving the rouge standing out like clown paint. You recorded us?" she whispered. "Every word," I said. "The gambling, the boat, the forgery, the way you spoke about my wife." I placed the recorder on the table, just out of their reach. "In the state of Florida," I said, my voice steady and cold, "a confession to a crime is admissible evidence, even if you didn't know you were being recorded, especially when it involves financial abuse of the elderly." Bradley stared at the device. He looked like he was going to be sick. "Dad," he stammered. "Dad, it was a joke. We were just talking. You can't use that." I picked up the checkbook, the one I had prepared earlier. "I'm not just going to use it, son," I said. "I'm going to play it for the judge." I tore the check out, the one for $1. I slid it across the table. It landed in front of Bradley. "What is this?" he asked, his voice shaking. "That," I said, "is your inheritance. $1. It's more than you deserve." Vanessa lunged across the table. She tried to grab the recorder. "Give me that!" she screamed. I was ready. I stepped back, snatching the device up. "Don't," I warned, "unless you want to add assault to the list of charges." Bradley looked at the check, then at me. There were tears in his eyes now. Crocodile tears. "Dad, please, you can't do this. We'll lose everything. The condo, the car." "You already lost it," I said. "You lost it when you decided to steal from a dying woman. You lost it when you decided to skip her funeral to drink champagne. And you definitely lost it when you decided to walk into my house and treat me like a dog in my own territory." I walked to the front door. I unlocked it. The smart lock chirped. "Get out," I said. They didn't move. They stood there, paralyzed by the sudden shift in power. "I said get out!" I roared, my voice booming off the walls. "Before I call the police and have them listen to this tape right here in the driveway." Vanessa grabbed her purse. She was trembling. She didn't look at Bradley. She ran. She ran out the door without looking back. Bradley stood there for a second longer. He looked at the empty chair where his mother used to sit. He looked at me. "Dad," he whimpered. I looked him in the eye. The man who pushed me. the man who mocked me. "I don't have a son," I said. "My son died on a boat in Miami. Now get off my property." He turned and fled. I slammed the door behind him. I locked it. Then I walked back to the dining room. I picked up the recorder. I picked up the wine bottle, and I poured the rest of the expensive Cabernet down the kitchen sink. It was poison, and I was finally purging it from my life. The confession hung in the air, thick and suffocating, like the humidity before a thunderstorm. I had what I needed on the tape, but the performance wasn't over. The final act required a witness. Bradley wiped his mouth with a napkin, his confidence surging now that he believed he had successfully bullied me into submission. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick text message. "Send him in," Bradley said, not looking at me. The front door opened. I hadn't heard a car pull up, which meant he had been waiting. Waiting like a vulture perched on a fence post. A man walked into the dining room. He was short, wearing a suit that was too shiny and cologne that smelled like desperate ambition. "Dad, this is Mr. Stone," Bradley said, gesturing to the man. "He's our attorney. He's here to notarize the transfer and ensure everything is binding." Mr. Stone didn't offer to shake my hand. He looked at me with the indifference of a man who made his living processing the misery of others. He opened his briefcase on the sideboard, the metal latches clicking loudly in the silence. He pulled out a heavy document, bound in blue legal paper, and laid it on the dining table, right next to the empty wine bottles. "Mr. Reed," Stone said, his voice raspy, "if you could please sign on the tabbed pages. Initial the bottom of each sheet. This transfers the deed of the property, the rights to the trust, and the power of attorney over your liquid assets to your son and daughter-in-law." He uncapped a heavy black fountain pen and held it out to me. I looked at the pen. It was an expensive instrument, probably bought with the money they stole from Martha's account. I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was razor sharp. I walked to the head of the table. Anna was leaning forward, her eyes wide, practically vibrating with anticipation. Bradley was bouncing his leg nervously under the table. They were so close. They could almost taste the money. I took the pen. It felt cold in my hand. I looked down at the paper. Quitclaim deed. The words seemed to swim before my eyes. This was the house where I carried Martha over the threshold. This was the house where we marked Bradley's height on the doorframe of the pantry. And now, a stranger in a cheap suit was waiting for me to sign it away to a son who preferred a yacht party to his mother's funeral. I lowered the pen to the paper. The tip hovered millimeters above the signature line. The room was absolutely silent. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear Vanessa's shallow, excited breathing. "Just sign it, Dad," Bradley whispered. "Let's get this over with." I stopped. I lifted the pen. "I need to get something," I said. Vanessa's head snapped up. "What? What do you need? You have the pen. Just sign the damn paper." "I need my checkbook," I said softly. Mr. Stone frowned. "Mr. Reed, there are no fees for you to pay. Your son is covering the legal costs." I shook my head. "No, it's not for a fee. I promised them the accounts. I want to write a starter check. To transfer the immediate funds. The cash." I saw the greed flash in Vanessa's eyes again. She thought I was talking about the rainy day fund, the $500,000 I had lied about. "Oh," she said, her voice instantly turning sweet. "Of course, Doug. Get the checkbook." I reached into my back pocket. I had placed it there before dinner. I pulled out the worn blue leather cover. I placed it on top of the deed. I opened it. The sound of the check tearing from the binding was sharp. Rip! I smoothed the check out on the table. I took the fancy black pen. I wrote the date. I wrote the payee, Bradley and Vanessa Reed. I moved my hand to the amount box. They were leaning in now. Mr. Stone was watching, bored. Bradley was watching, hungry. Vanessa was watching, triumphant. I wrote the number, 1.00. Then I moved to the line below to write it out in words. $1.00 over 100. I signed my name at the bottom. Douglas Reed. It was the strongest, boldest signature I had written in years. I didn't hand it to them. I picked up a paperclip from Mr. Stone's open briefcase. I clipped the check to the front page of the deed. Then I capped the pen. The click echoed in the room. I slid the entire stack, the deed, the power of attorney, and the check across the mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Bradley. "There," I said. Bradley looked down. He smiled at first, expecting to see a fortune. Then he squinted. $1? He stammered. He looked up at me, confused. "Dad, did you make a mistake? You missed the zeros." Vanessa snatched the paper from him. She brought it close to her face. "What the hell is this?" she screeched. $1. Is this a joke? I stood at the head of the table. I wasn't stooped anymore. I wasn't shaking. I looked at Mr. Stone, then at my son, then at his wife. "No," I said, my voice dropping to a low, gravelly timbre that filled the room. "It is not a joke. It is an appraisal." "An appraisal?" Bradley asked, his voice trembling. "Yes," I said. "You wanted my assets. You wanted what I have. But you forgot that in business, you only get what you pay for. And you paid for this with betrayal." I pointed a calloused finger at the check. "That is the value of the affection I have for you," I said. "That is the sum total of your worth as a son. $1. That is what you are worth to me now." Vanessa threw the papers onto the floor. "You senile old bat!" she screamed, her face twisting into something ugly. "We're not leaving here with $1. We're leaving with the house. Stone, make him sign the real papers." Mr. Stone took a step back. He was a sleazy lawyer, but he wasn't stupid. He saw the change in me. He saw the look of a man who had set a trap and was now springing it. "Mr. Reed," Stone said nervously, "if you were not signing voluntarily—" I cut him off. "Voluntarily?" I laughed. A cold, mirthless sound. "Oh, I'm not signing anything voluntarily. In fact, Mr. Stone, I'm glad you're here. You're an officer of the court, aren't you?" Stone nodded slowly. "Yes." "Good," I said. "Then you can be a witness." I reached into my shirt pocket. I pulled out the digital recorder. The red light was still blinking, a tiny, unblinking eye. I pressed stop. Then I pressed play. Bradley's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. "We didn't steal. It's my inheritance. We just expedited the process." Then Vanessa's voice. "You'd be amazed what a pair of sunglasses and a headscarf can do. I walked into that bank. I signed the slip, and voila." I let the recording play for another 10 seconds, just long enough for the color to drain completely from Stone's face. I pressed stop. "Mr. Stone," I said, looking at the lawyer, "you just heard your clients confess to felony bank fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. As an officer of the court, are you going to report this? Or do I need to add your name to the lawsuit for conspiracy? Stone slammed his briefcase shut. He didn't look at Bradley. He didn't look at Vanessa. He looked at the door. I was not aware of the nature of this transaction, Stone stammered. I am withdrawing my counsel, immediately. He turned and ran. He literally ran out of the front door, leaving his clients standing in the wreckage of their own greed. I looked back at Bradley and Vanessa. They were frozen. The check for $1 lay on the floor between them, looking like a piece of trash. The game is over, I said. Bradley looked at the recorder in my hand. Dad, he whispered, you wouldn't. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The night air rushed in, clean and cool. I would, I said. And I did. You have exactly 1 minute to get off my property before I call the police and play this tape for them. And take your check. You might need it to buy a phone call from jail. The front door was still standing wide open where Mr. Stone had fled, leaving a rectangle of dark night sky framing the chaos of my dining room. The silence that followed his departure was heavy, broken only by the sound of crickets chirping outside, oblivious to the destruction of a family happening within these walls. Bradley and Vanessa stood frozen, staring at the empty space where their lawyer had been just moments ago. They looked like children who had been caught playing with matches, only to realize the entire house was already on fire. Vanessa was the first to break the paralysis. Denial is a powerful drug, and she was overdosing on it. She spun around to face me, her face flushed with a mixture of rage and panic. He's an idiot, she spat, her voice shrill and trembling. He's a coward. We'll get a real lawyer, a shark. We'll sue him for malpractice, and then we'll come back for you, Doug. You think a tape recording scares us? That's entrapment. It won't hold up in court. I didn't answer her. I didn't have to. I simply looked toward the open door. From the darkness of the porch, a shadow stepped forward. It wasn't the frantic, scurrying figure of Mr. Stone. This figure moved with the slow, deliberate weight of authority. The leather soles of his shoes clicked rhythmically against the hardwood floor as he crossed the threshold. Bradley squinted, trying to make out the face. "Who is that?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "Who else did you invite to this circus?" The man stepped into the light of the chandelier. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Bradley's car. His silver hair was perfectly groomed, and his eyes behind his wire-rimmed glasses were sharp, intelligent, and utterly devoid of mercy. "Mr. Clinton," I said, nodding to him. "Thank you for waiting." Mr. Clinton nodded back. He didn't look at Bradley or Vanessa. He walked straight to the dining table, pushed aside the spilled wine and the check for $1, and placed his own briefcase down. It landed with a heavy, solid thud that sounded like a gavel striking a bench. "I believe your previous counsel has resigned," Clinton said, his voice a deep baritone that commanded the room. "That is wise of him." He realized he was aiding and abetting a felony. "I suggest you listen very carefully to what happens next, because your opportunity to speak has officially ended." Bradley took a step back. He recognized the name. Everyone in town knew the name Clinton. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to destroy a business or bury a rival. He wasn't a family attorney. He was a weapon. "Dad," Bradley whispered, the color draining from his face. "Why is he here?" "He is here," I said, walking over to stand beside my lawyer, "because he wrote the will, and he wrote the trust." Vanessa laughed nervously. "The trust? What trust? This house is a marital asset. Martha died. You're the surviving spouse. It's simple probate law. Clinton finally looked at her. He looked at her the way a scientist looks at a specimen under a microscope, with detachment and mild disgust. Mrs. Reed, Clinton said calmly, you are operating under a significant misunderstanding of the law. You assumed this house was a simple asset. You assumed that upon Martha's death it would pass to Doug and eventually to his heir. You assumed that the laws of intestacy would protect your husband's claim to this property. He clicked the latches of his briefcase open. Snap, snap. He pulled out a thick binder. It was labeled, The Reed Family Revocable Living Trust. However, Clinton continued, opening the binder, Doug and Martha were not simple people. They were prudent. 5 years ago, after your husband's second arrest for driving under the influence, and after his first request for a bailout to cover gambling debts, my clients came to me. They were heartbroken, but they were realistic. They realized that their only son was not capable of managing wealth. He was only capable of consuming it. Bradley flinched as if he had been slapped. So, Clinton said, turning a page, they transferred the title of this house, the investment accounts, and the bonds into this trust. Doug does not own this house. Martha did not own this house. The trust owns the house. And the trust is governed by a very specific set of bylaws. So what? Vanessa sneered, crossing her arms. Bradley is the only beneficiary. The trust has to pay out to him eventually. You're just delaying the inevitable. Clinton smiled. It was a cold, thin smile. Actually, he said, drawing the word out, the trust is designed to protect the assets from creditors, predators, and unworthy beneficiaries. He pointed to a paragraph in the middle of the page. Section 4, paragraph B, Clinton read aloud. The moral obligation and disinheritance clause. He looked up over his glasses. This clause was inserted at Martha's insistence, he said. She loved you, Bradley. She loved you enough to protect you from yourself. But she also had dignity. She stipulated that, in the event of the death of either grantor, the primary beneficiary, that is you, Bradley, must demonstrate a commitment to the family unit. Specifically, the clause states that any beneficiary who fails to attend the funeral services of a grantor without a documented medical emergency or force majeure shall be automatically removed from the trust. The room went dead silent. Bradley's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at me. He looked at the binder. Clinton continued reading, his voice relentless. Furthermore, any beneficiary found to be engaging in celebrations, recreational travel, or social events on the day of said funeral shall be deemed to have severed their familial bond. In such an event, their status as beneficiary is immediately revoked, and the assets are to be redirected to the secondary beneficiaries, the veterans of foreign wars and the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Vanessa shook her head violently. No, that's not legal. You can't enforce that. That's subjective. You can't prove he was celebrating. He was grieving. He was grieving in his own way. She turned to Bradley, grabbing his arm. Tell him you were sick. Tell him you couldn't make it. Bradley stammered. The traffic. I told you, Dad. The traffic from the coast was terrible. We were stuck. Clinton reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a legal document. He pulled out a photograph. It was printed on glossy paper, high resolution. He slid it across the table. It was the screenshot I had taken in the graveyard. The image was vibrant and colorful, the turquoise ocean, the expensive sunglasses, the bottle of Dom Perignon. The caption, "Living our best lives, no regrets." The timestamp was clearly visible at the top. October 17th, 2:15 p.m. Clinton tapped the photo with his index finger. At 2:15 p.m. on October 17th, Clinton said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. Martha Reed was being lowered into the ground. While Doug was throwing the first shovel of dirt onto his wife's coffin, you were throwing a party. He looked at Bradley. Is this traffic, Bradley? Is this grief? Bradley stared at the photo. He stared at his own smiling face, frozen in time, mocking him. He couldn't deny it. It was his own post. His own vanity had become the evidence that destroyed him. You posted this, Clinton said. You broadcast your indifference to the world, and in doing so, you triggered Section 4, Paragraph B. Clinton closed the binder with a sharp slap. As of this moment, Clinton declared, you are not the heir to the Reed estate. You are a stranger. You have no claim to this house. You have no claim to the accounts. You have no claim to anything that belonged to Martha or Doug Reed. Vanessa grabbed the photo and crumpled it in her fist. This is insane, she screamed. We'll fight this. We'll get a judge to overturn it. It's coercion. You will try, Clinton said calmly. And when you do, I will present this photo to the judge. And I will present the tape recording of you admitting to forgery. And I will present the police report regarding your husband's yacht accident. And the judge will not only uphold the trust, he will likely recommend criminal charges. Clinton turned to me. The asset is secure, Doug. The transfer to the charities has already been prepared. It just needs your signature to finalize the redirection. I looked at my son. He was shaking. He wasn't shaking with anger anymore. He was shaking with the terrifying realization that he had gambled his entire future on a bluff, and he had lost. You traded $1 million inheritance for a birthday party, I said to him. Bradley looked up, tears streaming down his face. Dad, I didn't know. I didn't know about the clause. If you had loved her, I said, it wouldn't have mattered if you knew. You would have been there. You didn't lose the money because of a clause, son. You lost it because of your heart. Or lack of it. I turned to Vanessa. And you, I said. You wanted to know who owns this house? I pointed to the floor. The trust owns it. And as the surviving trustee, I determine who resides here. And the trust has a very strict policy against trespassers. I looked at Clinton. What is the next step? I asked. Clinton smiled. The house is safe, he said. Now, let's talk about the apartment. Bradley's head snapped up. The apartment? Yes, Clinton said, reaching for a second file. The one you live in. The one you think you own. The one you were about to be evicted from. The air left the room completely. They thought the worst had happened. They thought losing the inheritance was the bottom. They were wrong. We had not even begun to dig. The air in the dining room was thick enough to choke on. My son stood there, stripping the last shreds of his dignity away with every breath he took. He had just lost his mother's legacy, but arrogance is a hard habit to break. He buttoned his jacket, trying to summon the ghost of the man he pretended to be. The successful entrepreneur, the high roller, the man who didn't need his father's charity. He grabbed Vanessa's hand. She was limp, still staring at the crumpled photograph of the yacht party, but she let him pull her toward the door. Fine, Bradley spat, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and humiliation. Keep your house. Keep your dusty furniture and your sad memories. We don't need this place. We never did. We were doing you a favor, old man. We have a penthouse in the city. We have a view of skyline that you couldn't afford in 1,000 lifetimes. Come on, Ness. Let's go home. He turned his back on me. He reached for the brass handle of the front door. I didn't move. I didn't have to. I just looked at Mr. Clinton. Mr. Clinton cleared his throat. It was a polite sound, almost gentle, but it stopped Bradley dead in his tracks. "One moment, Bradley," Clinton said. Bradley spun around, his face twisted. "What now?" "You took the inheritance. You made your point. We're leaving." Clinton reached into his briefcase again. He pulled out a different file. This one wasn't blue like the trust. It was red. The color of warning. The color of debt. "We need to discuss your residence," Clinton said calmly. "The penthouse, Unit 405 at the Westview Towers. Is that correct?" Bradley narrowed his eyes. "How do you know my unit number?" Clinton opened the file. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the document with the precision of a surgeon looking for a tumor. "I know it because I have the title search right here," Clinton said. "And I see something interesting. You bought the place 3 years ago. But you didn't buy it outright. You took out a jumbo mortgage. And then, 6 months ago, you took out a second mortgage. A bridge loan. High interest. Short term. Secured against the equity of the property." Bradley's face went pale. He released the door handle. "That's private financial information," he stammered. "That's none of your business." "It became my business this morning," Clinton replied, turning a page. "You see, that second lender, Gulf Coast Capital, they don't like risk. And you, Bradley, are a risk. You missed your payment in September. You were late in October. They were getting ready to file a notice of default." "So what?" Bradley shouted, his voice echoing in the empty hallway. "I'll pay them. I just need a few weeks, once I get settled." "You don't have a few weeks," Clinton said, "because Gulf Coast Capital doesn't hold the note anymore. They sold it." "Sold it?" Bradley frowned. "To who?" Clinton slid a document across the mahogany table. It wasn't a check this time. It was a notice of assignment of debt. "To a private investment firm," Clinton said. "A holding company called Shadow Creek LLC. They bought your debt at a discount this morning. They paid cash. They now own the lien on your apartment." Bradley walked slowly back to the table. He picked up the paper. His hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled like a dry leaf in the wind. "Shadow Creek LLC?" he whispered. "Who is that? I've never heard of them." I stepped forward. I walked out of the shadows and stood directly under the chandelier. "You wouldn't have heard of them," I said softly. "It's a very small company. It only has one member." Bradley looked up at me. His eyes widened. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He stepped back, bumping into Vanessa. "No," he whispered. "No. You?" "Me," I said. "I created Shadow Creek LLC 5 years ago," I explained, keeping my voice devoid of emotion. "I used it to buy rental properties, to build a future. Today, I used it to buy you." Vanessa gasped. She grabbed Bradley's arm, her nails digging into his expensive suit jacket. "What does that mean?" she demanded, her voice rising to a panic. "What does it mean he bought the debt?" "It means," Clinton interjected, his voice sharp and professional, "that Doug is now your creditor. He is the bank. And unlike the previous lender, he is not interested in late fees or renegotiation. "So I'll pay you," Bradley yelled, trying to regain control. "I'll write you a check next month. I'll pay you the interest. Just let us go." I shook my head slowly. "It's too late for that, son." I pointed to the digital recorder sitting on the table. The little red light had been extinguished, but the damage it had captured was permanent. "Standard loan agreements contain a clause," I said. "It's called the acceleration clause. It states that if the lender has reasonable cause to believe the borrower's financial condition is unstable, or if the borrower engages in illegal activity that jeopardizes their ability to repay, the lender can demand the full balance immediately." I picked up the recorder. "You just confessed to a felony," I said. "You confessed to forging a check because you were broke. You confessed to owing $30,000 to a boat rental agency. You confessed to gambling addiction." I looked him dead in the eye. "That makes you a high-risk borrower, Bradley. And as your lender, I am calling the note due." Bradley looked at Clinton. Is that legal?" Clinton nodded. "It is entirely legal. Shadow Creek LLC is exercising its right to protect its investment. You admitted to fraud. That voids the grace period." I stepped closer to my son. I was close enough to smell the sour scent of fear on him. "You owe the principal balance of $420,000, I said, plus interest, plus penalties." I held out my hand. "Pay me," I said. Bradley stared at my hand. He looked like he was going to vomit. "Dad, I don't have $400,000. You know I don't." "I know," I said. "And since you cannot pay the debt, I am initiating foreclosure proceedings. Immediately." "Foreclosure?" Vanessa screamed. "You can't do that. That's our home. All my clothes are there, my studio. We have a life there." "Not anymore," I said. Clinton pulled a final document from the red file. It was a paper with a bright orange sticker on the top. Eviction notice. "My team filed the paperwork an hour ago," Clinton said. "Since the default was already in progress when we bought the debt, and given the admission of criminal insolvency, we requested an expedited order. The sheriff will be at Westview Towers tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock to change the locks." "Tomorrow?" Bradley wheezed. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. I turned to Vanessa. "You said you wanted a fresh start," I said coldly. "You said my house was too full of old memories. Well, now you have exactly what you wanted. A blank slate. You have no house. You have no debt, because I'll take the condo to satisfy it. You are free." Vanessa looked at me with pure hatred. Her face was twisted, ugly, stripped of all its vanity. "You monster," she hissed. "You are destroying your own son. You are putting us on the street. How can you sleep at night?" I looked at her. I thought about the empty chair at the funeral. I thought about the forged signature on the check. I thought about the way she threw Martha's wedding veil on the floor. "I sleep very well," I said, "because I sleep with a clean conscience. Can you say the same?" Bradley fell to his knees. It wasn't a figure of speech. His legs simply gave out. He collapsed onto the hardwood floor, sobbing. He reached out and grabbed the hem of my pants. "Dad, please," he cried. "Please don't do this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll leave, Vanessa. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't take the apartment. It's all I have." I looked down at him. He was pathetic. He was offering to trade his wife for an apartment, just like he had traded his mother for a party. "You don't have the apartment," I said, pulling my leg away from his grasp. "You never did. You rented a life you couldn't afford to impress people who don't care about you. I looked at Clinton. Give them the copy, I said. Clinton handed a photocopy of the eviction notice to Vanessa. She didn't take it. She let it fall to the floor. You have tonight to pack, I said. I suggest you hurry. It takes a long time to pack a life of lies into cardboard boxes. Bradley looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. Where will we go? He whispered. I walked to the door and held it open again. The night was dark, but the air was fresh. That, I said, is a question for a man with $1 to his name. I pointed to the check still lying on the table. Don't forget your inheritance, I said. You might need it to buy a box to sleep in. I watched them. I watched the realization settle over them like a shroud. They were not just disinherited. They were erased. I had taken the roof over their heads, the money in their pockets, and the ground beneath their feet. Get out, I said one last time. And this time, they ran. They didn't walk with arrogance. They didn't stomp with entitlement. They ran like rats fleeing a sinking ship, disappearing into the darkness of a world that owed them absolutely nothing. They were halfway down the porch steps when the flashing lights cut through the darkness. It wasn't just one car. It was 3. Red and blue lights swirled against the white columns of the house, turning the quiet suburban street into a theater of judgment. Bradley froze. He held his hand up to shield his eyes from the glare. What is this? He screamed, turning back to look at me in the doorway. You called the cops? You actually called them? I didn't answer. I stepped out onto the porch, flanked by Mr. Clinton. Vanessa grabbed Bradley's arm, but this time it wasn't for support. It was a claw-like grip of panic. Bradley, do something, she shrieked. Tell them it's a mistake. A car door slammed, then another. 2 uniformed officers and a man in a plain suit walked up the driveway. The man in the suit held a badge up. Bradley Reed? He asked, his voice booming over the sound of the idling engines. Yes, Bradley answered, his voice small and trembling. I am Detective Miller from the Fraud Division, the man said. We have a warrant for your arrest. Arrest? Bradley took a step back, nearly tripping over a potted plant. For what? I didn't do anything. Detective Miller continued walking, his pace steady and unhurried. He had seen men like Bradley 1,000 times before. Men who thought a suit and a tie made them immune to consequences. We have a warrant for forgery in the 1st degree, grand theft, and elder abuse, Miller recited. We have video evidence from First National Bank, and we have a sworn affidavit from the trustee of the Reed Family Trust regarding the theft of $50,000. Bradley looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a betrayal that was entirely self-inflicted. Dad, he pleaded. Dad, tell them. It was a loan. You said we could work it out. I looked down at him from the top of the stairs. I never said that, I replied calmly. I said you had a minute to leave. You wasted it arguing. Detective Miller reached Bradley. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously. Turn around and place your hands behind your back, Miller ordered. Bradley didn't move. He looked at Vanessa. Ness, call Stone. Call someone. Tell them I'm innocent. And then, the final rat jumped from the sinking ship. Vanessa took a step away from him. She held her hands up in a gesture of surrender, creating physical distance between herself and her husband. I didn't do it, she said loudly, looking directly at the detective. It was him. It was all him. Bradley's head snapped toward her. What? Vanessa's voice became shrill, desperate. "He made me do it," she cried. "He's a gambler. He owes money all over town. He told me his mother gave him permission to take the money. I didn't know she was in a coma. I just did what he told me." Bradley stared at her. The woman he had skipped his mother's funeral for. The woman he had shoved his father for. The woman he had destroyed his life for. "Vanessa," he gasped. "You were the one who put on the scarf. You were the one who signed the check." Vanessa shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face, tears that appeared on command. "I was scared of him," she lied. "He's violent. He shoved his father today. Look, ask his father. He shoved him to the ground. I was terrified he would hurt me if I didn't help him get the money." She turned to me. "Doug, tell them. Tell them how he pushed you. I tried to stop him." I watched her performance. It was impressive. It was also the most disgusting thing I had ever witnessed. I looked at the detective. "Detective," I said, "my son did shove me. That is true." Vanessa smirked through her tears. "See?" "But," I continued, my voice cutting through her victory like a knife, "the forgery was a joint effort. And the woman standing there is the one who impersonated my wife. I believe the bank teller identified her specifically by the sunglasses she is currently holding in her hand." Vanessa's smirk vanished. She looked down at the Chanel sunglasses she was clutching. Detective Miller nodded to one of the uniformed officers. "Take her too," he said. "Accomplice to fraud." "No!" Vanessa screamed as the officer reached for her. "You can't touch me! My father is a lawyer!" The officer didn't care who her father was. He spun her around and clamped the cuffs on her wrists. The cold steel snapped shut, silencing her protests with the reality of the law. "I'm divorcing you!" she screamed at Bradley as they were both shoved toward the patrol cars. "I'm filing tomorrow! You loser! You dragged me into this! I hate you!" Bradley didn't fight. He slumped against the side of the police car. He looked at the house. He looked at the warm yellow lights spilling out from the windows. The home he had grown up in. The home he had tried to steal. Then he looked at me. "Dad," he sobbed. "I'm sorry. Please. I'm scared." I walked down the steps. I stopped a few feet away from him. I looked at my son, handcuffed, weeping, stripping of everything he thought mattered. He had no wife, he had no house, he had no money, and he had no freedom. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a profound, heavy sadness. But sadness is not weakness. "You should be scared," I said softly. "You are going to a place where your entitlement won't save you." "Dad, help me." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the check for $1. I walked over to the police car. I tucked the check into the breast pocket of his jacket. "Use this for the commissary," I said. The officer placed his hand on Bradley's head and guided him into the back seat. The door slammed shut. It was a final sound, a definitive end to the chapter of my life where I was a father. I watched through the glass as Bradley leaned his head against the window, sobbing. He looked like a little boy again. But he wasn't a little boy. He was a man who had made his choices. The sirens didn't wail as they drove away. They just flashed, silent and rhythmic, fading down the street until they disappeared around the corner, taking the noise, the greed, and the betrayal with them. I stood in the driveway for a long time. The night was quiet again. The crickets resumed their song. Mr. Clinton walked up beside me. "Are you all right, Doug?" he asked. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and jasmine. It didn't smell like perfume or stale wine anymore. I am, I said. I looked at the house. It was just a building, wood and brick. But inside it held 40 years of memories that I had almost let them taint. Do you want me to call a cleaning crew? Clinton asked. To remove their things? No, I said. I'll do it myself. I want to burn it. Clinton nodded. He understood. I turned and walked back up the steps. I walked into the house and closed the door. I locked it. Not with a smart lock, but with the old deadbolt I had reinstalled myself while they were packing. The house was empty, but for the first time in days, it didn't feel lonely. It felt clean. I walked to the dining room. I picked up the wine glasses and threw them into the trash. I stripped the tablecloth and threw it in with them. Then I went to the mantel. I picked up the urn that held Martha's ashes. I sat down in my armchair, the leather groaning familiarly under my weight. I told you I would handle it, Martha, I whispered into the silence. And I did. My son preferred a party to a funeral. Now he would have plenty of time to think about that choice in a cell where the lights never turn off. I closed my eyes. I was tired. But it was a good tired. The kind of tired that comes after a long day of hard, necessary work. Tomorrow, I would plant new roses. Tomorrow, I would donate the money to the cancer ward. Tomorrow, life would begin again. But tonight, I would sleep. And for the first time since Martha died, I knew I would not have nightmares, because the monsters were gone, and the king was back in his castle. The house has a different sound now. For the last month, it had echoed with the noise of lawyers, movers, and the ghost of a battle I never wanted to fight. But today, the silence is back. It is not the empty, aching silence that greeted me after Martha died. It is a clean silence. The kind that settles over a forest after a wildfire has burned itself out, leaving the ground ready for new growth. I spent the morning scrubbing the guest room. I stripped the sheets where Vanessa had slept, washing away the cloying scent of her perfume with bleach and hot water. I opened the windows to let the Florida breeze carry the last stagnant remnants of their presence out to sea. The air in the house is mine again. It smells of lemon polish, old books, and the faint, comforting aroma of the coffee I brew every morning. I walked into the dining room. The table, the same mahogany surface where my son tried to steal my life, was bare. No legal papers, no spilled wine. Just the wood, gleaming under the morning sun. I ran my hand along the edge. It felt solid, enduring, like me. Mr. Clinton came over around noon. He didn't bring a briefcase this time. He brought a check, a real one. "It's done, Doug," he said, handing me the envelope. "The foreclosure on the condo is finalized. We sold it at auction yesterday. After paying off the lien your LLC held and the legal fees, this is the surplus." I opened the envelope. It was a check for $80,000. It was all that was left of Bradley's high-flying life. His equity, his dreams, his pretenses, all reduced to a piece of paper that weighed nothing in my hand. I didn't look at it for long. I didn't want it. That money was tainted. It was money earned through gambling, through debt, through the neglect of everything that actually mattered. "Take it back," I said, handing the envelope to Clinton. Clinton looked surprised. "Doug, this is yours. You bought the debt. This is your profit." I shook my head. "No, I don't want profit from my son's failure. I want purpose. I walked over to the desk where I kept Martha's photo. She was smiling in the picture, wearing a sun hat, her hands covered in garden soil. "Deposit it into the Martha Reed Memorial Fund," I said. "Give it to the cancer ward at St. Jude's. Tell them to buy new chairs for the chemotherapy room. The comfortable ones. The ones Martha wished she had." Clinton smiled. He took the check back and placed it in his pocket. "She would like that, Doug." He paused, his hand lingering on his jacket pocket. "There is one more thing," he said. He pulled out a letter. The envelope was plain white, stamped with the stark black ink of the county correctional facility. The handwriting on the front was jagged, desperate. "To Dad." I stared at it. "It arrived at my office this morning," Clinton said softly. "He's in the holding block, awaiting trial. He's asking for bail money, Doug. He says he can't handle it in there." I took the letter. I felt the texture of the cheap paper. I imagined Bradley sitting on a metal cot, writing this. I imagined him crying. I imagined him promising to change, promising to be the son I always wanted, promising anything to get out of the consequences of his actions. I held the letter for a long moment. A part of me, the part that remembered teaching him to tie his shoes, the part that remembered his first day of school, wanted to open it, wanted to read the words, "I'm sorry." But then I remembered the yacht. I remembered the forged signature. I remembered the shove. "Words are easy," I said to the empty room. "Actions are what define a man." I didn't open the envelope. I walked to the fireplace. I struck a match. The flame flared up, bright and sudden. I held the corner of the letter to the fire. The paper curled and blackened. The ink vanished. The plea for help turned into smoke and ash, rising up the chimney to disappear into the sky. I watched it burn until it was nothing but gray dust on the hearth. "I'm sorry too, son," I whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't teach you sooner that the check comes due for everyone." Clinton watched me. He didn't say a word. He understood that this was the final funeral I had to attend, the funeral of my hope for Bradley. When the last ember died out, I turned back to him. "Do you want coffee?" I asked. Clinton nodded. "I would love some." We went to the kitchen. We drank coffee out of the mugs Martha had painted in her pottery class. We talked about baseball. We talked about the weather. We didn't talk about Bradley. We didn't talk about Vanessa. They were gone. And for the first time in a month, I didn't feel the heavy weight of their shadow. I am alone in this big house now, but I am not lonely. The peace I have is hard-won, and I will not let anyone steal it again. I have my garden to tend to. I have my memories to keep safe. And I have the satisfaction of knowing that I kept my promise to Martha. I protected our home. And in a way, by letting him face the fire, I am finally trying to save our son. The rain has finally stopped. For the last month, it felt like the sky over Florida was weeping right along with me. A gray, relentless curtain that matched the chaos inside my home. But today, the sun is shining. It is a bright, piercing yellow that warms the skin and makes the world look sharp and clear again. I drove the old Ford truck to the cemetery. It rattles a bit when I hit 40 miles an hour, and the air conditioning gave up 10 years ago, but it runs true. It is honest. That is all I care about now. Honesty. I walked across the grass. It is green and lush, no longer the muddy scar it was on the day of the funeral. The birds are singing in the oak trees, oblivious to human grief, oblivious to legal battles and bank fraud. They are just living. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I am just living too. I reached Martha's stone. It is granite, polished to a mirror shine. I ran my hand over her name. The stone was warm from the sun. I brought you roses, I said aloud. My voice didn't crack. It was steady. Yellow ones. For friendship. Because before you were my wife, and before you were a mother, you were my best friend. I knelt down and placed the flowers in the vase. I took a moment to arrange them, making sure they stood tall against the breeze. I handled it, Martha, I whispered, just like I promised. I sat there for a long time, just watching the shadows of the leaves dance across her name. I know what people might say. I know there are people who will hear my story and call me a monster. They will say that a father's love should be unconditional. They will say that I should have bailed him out, that I should have paid the debt, that I should have let him keep the apartment and the pretense of a life. They will say that putting my own son in jail is a sin against nature. But they are wrong. Unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance. To love someone is to want the best for them. And sometimes, the best thing for a man is to face the wreckage of his own choices. If I had saved him again, if I had written another check, I would have been paying for his coffin. He was drowning in his own greed, and I was the one holding his head under water by refusing to let him hit the bottom. I didn't destroy Bradley. I saved him from becoming Vanessa. I saved him from a life where he believed that he could steal, lie, and cheat without consequence. I looked at the empty space beside Martha's grave, the space reserved for me. I am not ready to fill that space yet, I said. I have work to do. I thought about the letter I burned. I thought about the check for $1. That dollar was not an insult. It was a baseline. It was the starting point. If Bradley ever gets out, if he ever decides to earn a second dollar, it will be the first honest money he has ever made. And maybe, just maybe, that honest dollar will mean more to him than the millions he tried to steal. Forgiveness is not a gift you hand out to those who do not repent. Forgiveness is a bridge. And you cannot build a bridge if the person on the other side is still trying to burn it down. My actions were not revenge. I did not take his house to hurt him. I took it to teach him. This was the final lesson. The lesson I should have taught him when he was 6 years old and stole a candy bar. The lesson I should have taught him when he was 16 and wrecked the car. You cannot build a life on a foundation of lies. Eventually, the ground will open up and swallow you whole. I stood up. My knees popped, a reminder of my 70 years, but I felt light. The heavy burden of secrets, of protecting a grown man from his own shadow, was gone. I touched the top of the headstone one last time. Sleep well, my love, I said. The house is clean. The debt is paid. And I am going home. I walked back to the truck. The sun was high in the sky now, illuminating the path forward. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Maybe loneliness. Maybe peace. But whatever it is, it will be the truth. And the truth is the only thing worth dying for, and the only thing worth living for. This has been the story of how I lost a son, but found my dignity. I hope it serves as a warning to those who take family for granted, and a comfort to those who have had to make hard choices to protect their own souls. So I ask you now, did I go too far? Was I too harsh on a son who was grieving in his own twisted way? Or did I do the only thing a father could do to save his child's soul? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you believe in justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the shadows. Until next time, remember, respect is earned, loyalty is returned, and sometimes the hardest thing to do is the right thing. Through the ashes of this betrayal, I learned a lesson that came too late to save my family, but just in time to save myself. I learned that an open wallet does not build character. It only subsidizes weakness. For years, I confused enabling with loving, thinking that if I shielded Bradley from the rain, he would appreciate the shelter. Instead, he just demanded I stop the storm. True parental love isn't about being a safety net that catches them every time they fall. Sometimes, it is about letting them hit the ground so they can finally learn how to stand up on their own. I didn't lose a son when I evicted him. I released him to find the man he was supposed to be. Now I turn the gavel over to you. Was my judgment too harsh? Or was it the only way to break the cycle of greed? Tell me your verdict in the comments below. If you believe that dignity has no price tag, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Until next time.